Okay, so this will be part 5 of my answers that I'm giving to Deconverted Man who asked me questions, and we'll roll
The
that.
Bible holds the answers if you open your mind and spirit to look.
Oh, you're funny. Uh, yeah, if you open your mind and your spirit to look, then you'll find it. So see, if you don't find it, then you really didn't open your mind or your spirit hard enough to look. This is a great get out of jail free sort of card, scapegoat sort of thing. Well, you just didn't pray and try hard enough. That's why you didn't find God. No. See, here's how I did it. Instead of looking at the Bible to see if I could find God, which I had done for many years, I decided to see what evidence there was that the Bible was true, say. And then when I found none for that, I stopped believing that it was true. So rather than assuming that it's true and reading it and pretending that it's true, I went to see if it was true and found out that it wasn't true. But you want us to do the exact opposite. So I could just use this idea for anything. If you read the Lobsterist book with an open mind and an open spirit, you'll discover that it's really true. Ah, you read it and you don't believe that it's true. Obviously, you don't have an open mind or an open spirit because you don't believe that it's true. You just didn't try hard enough. You just don't want it to be true.
Well, when I hear somebody say that the Bible's not true, first thing that pops to my mind, I said, well, I guess that must mean that instead of thou shalt not murder, then it should be thou shalt murder. And thou shalt not steal, it's really thou shalt steal. So when you say the Bible's not true, that's a pretty broad statement. It's truth to me. Now, when you get into the minutia, or at least what I consider to be the minutia, well, it's kind of like when people ask me if God can create a rock that is so big that even He can't lift it. And that's kind of what I was getting from questions that Yin Yang Mountain was asking me, which I did want to answer, and I could do that now. And I think it was, I guess one of the earlier questions was, do you believe in a 6,000-year-old Earth? And I had heard that before, and I asked a pastor friend of mine on Monday if that's what he believed, and he said he did. And I thought, wow. And I don't really talk about it with other Christians, really. I think that a lot of Christians would believe that I'm not a Christian unless I did believe that. I mean, people come up with all kinds of things. I mean, there really is a diverse, and to me, I see, people missing the forest for the trees. I think they major on the minors, minor on the majors, and I think they really get distracted by things that they shouldn't get distracted by. And then on Tuesday, I guess I looked up some prophecy verses or something. And then on Wednesday night, I was at church, and the pastor was speaking on Rahab the harlot, the walls of Jericho, and he just kind of breezed by this. This wasn't really anything important in his message, and I don't think it should be. But he said the city of Jericho had been there for more than 10,000 years. It was among the oldest cities that they know about. And I thought, 10,000 years. Well, I just talked to somebody a few days ago that said 6,000 years. And you might think, well, that contradiction that would rattle my faith. Actually, it made me feel better about it. I thought, well, who knows, and who cares? I'll quote Hillary Clinton on that. What difference at this point does it make? Anyway, yeah, it doesn't. That sort of thing is not my thing. I look at the Bible as a macro. I look at it as the truth, and I do believe the supernatural aspects of the Bible, but I really see it as creation, failure, separation, promise, sacrifice, redemption, resurrection, reconciliation, reunion. I see the I try to see the important things. And I mean, as far as people's beliefs, it goes all over the place. I mean, like, there are people that don't believe that man walked on the moon. And it seems like each year, the number of people that don't believe that is actually increasing, which is bizarre. And then there's, 9/11 inside job. And I have a feeling that 30 years from now, well, it's a feeling. I won't have anything to base it on. It could be a much higher percentage that believe this. So it seems like the further out you get, the crazier things get, and JFK and all this kind of stuff. So it's all over the place, and you have to make a decision. You look at, and I don't see anything wrong with reasoning from your own perspective and from what you see. For example, a couple of weeks ago, I was listening to Michio Kaku's show, like I like to do. Somebody called in. They asked, why does time seem to go by quicker as you get older? And people ask me that sometimes. I have an answer, but his answer wasn't quite like my answer, and I was a little disappointed. He said that it was basically that there's a lot of repetition, and we don't store that information that we don't need to store, which makes sense. However, I always saw it as being relative to the age that you are. Like when I was 10, I remember thinking back on how quickly that summer break, between school sessions went by, and I thought, man, a few years back it seemed to go by a lot slower, and then I realized I'm a math guy, and so I thought, well, I'm 10 years old. This is 1/10, like a year is 1/10 of my life. When I was 5, it was 1/5, so it's like probably going to be twice as fast. And now that I'm over 50, 1 year is 1/50th of my life, and it goes a lot faster. It makes sense. So I don't have scientific proof of that. I don't know how you would prove that, but when I say it, does it not sound reasonable? And if it sounds reasonable, is it unreasonable to go with what you see as being reasonable? So I go with it, That's kind of how I make those decisions. As far as my salvation experience, it was personal. I wouldn't be able to transpose that to another person. It would be basically like me trying to prove that I'm in love with this woman or something. I could say, well, I bought her 12 roses. And then you could say, well, she's rich. You just want her money or something like that. You could ascribe an ulterior motive other than love, maybe greed. So how do you prove that? And so from my personal experience, you could say that it was revelation, but for me it was more like a miracle, because 2 months earlier, if somebody had told me what was going to happen, I would not have believed that. I would have laughed, because I'd always laughed at that. It always seemed, the way I looked at Christianity was a list of do's and don'ts. The do's were the things I wanted to do, and or rather the don'ts were the things that I wanted to do, and the do's were the things I didn't want to do. So that's the way I looked at it. I didn't really see any reason to look into it any further than that. But I won't go into too much detail there. Let's see where we're at. Well, as far as science goes, I don't know if I'm going to live long enough to have the kind of proof that you're looking for as far as evidence of God, that type of evidence. It could be that. Now you said, I'm not sure if we just passed it or if we're coming up to that, like why did he create you if since he knew that you weren't going to believe? Well, you're a skeptic, but you're looking for the truth. You can't rule out 100% that decades from now, well, maybe the Hadron Collider will come up with the proof that you're looking for, or some other situation will arise that you'll see. I mean, there's a lot of things that we have to decide. For example, if you're going to open a business, you don't have 100% certainty that you're going to succeed in the business. You can theorize about it, you can hypothesize, and you can, do your best to try to figure it out. But I mean, if you don't make a move, you can guarantee that you're not going to succeed and nothing will happen. But at some point, everything can be over analyzed and paralyzing to some extent. So I see it really as three choices. I don't see it as two choices. So I could decide to believe in a creator. I could decide not to believe, but I could also decide not to decide. And I'm going to take that scripture from Geddy Lee, where he says, if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. That's from that song Free Will that Rush do. I'm pretty sure those guys are atheists. I'm pretty sure of that. They do a song called Anthem. I think they're randoids. I had a partner in the 80s who was a randoid, and he was an objectivist, and he was a libertarian, very active in his libertarian party. He was a good guy. He's still a friend. But people, like, I mean, I read, he loaned me some of the books that Rand had written, you know, on objectivism and stuff, and it reminded me more of Nietzsche, and I didn't find it appealing. I only found it interesting. But, you know, do you really trust people? Like, if you know somebody around you is really into objectivism, is that somebody that you really trust in a tight spot? Think about that. But anyways, that's off the topic. Yeah, okay, let's go further.
1,500 years worth of writings by 39 authors that all point to the same Savior.
And you don't know your biblical history, so no to all of that.
Well, okay, as far as the canonization goes, and, you know, Catholic Church, and what books of the Bible should be in the Bible or shouldn't be in the Bible, I guess Revelation almost wasn't in the Bible. And, of course, a popular book that came out maybe 100 years before Jesus was the Book of Enoch. That's not in the Bible that I have. It might be in the Catholic Bible, I'm not sure. I've read it. I could see why it's not in the Bible. I mean, I don't think there's a reason, you know, that anybody would need to read it. It's interesting. Of course, it has nothing really to do, well, it's written about Enoch. It's certainly not written by Enoch. And so there's examples of all kinds of things, like I think the very ending of Mark is not in most of the early manuscripts, and then there's certain other verses that are not in earlier manuscripts, and I can go on and on and on. I mean, the partner that I was telling you about, who was the randoid, he was very anti-Christian, and, you know, so I kind of like, yeah, you could definitely find people that would just totally dissect, you know, the writings. But there again, I go back to looking at it as a macro and seeing truth in the Bible, and that's sufficient for me. I guess I see somebody who's going into the detail of those things is somebody, if somebody was going to make a biography of a famous person, and they hired the actor to play this person who had brown eyes, but the person in real life had blue eyes. So then people say, well, that movie is totally false. There's nothing true about that movie because the guy didn't have the right eye color. You know, it's like when David Letterman used to do those movie reviews. You know, a plumber would do a movie review, or an electrician, or someone like that, and they would point out, you know, different aspects of, you know, the plumbing is wrong, or something like that. They're missing the big picture. They're not seeing the forest for the trees.